Hear anything?
No.
Okay, I'll send it to you later.
Yeah, so far this is going off without a hitch.
Welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar.
A place where pop culture loving creatives
Discover design icons that make us tick.
and we share a few cocktails in the process.
Yep.
Today, we venture back to the groovy 1970s.
Bottoms were belled, hips were hugged,
Music went grand and cheesy.
and the nation gussied up for the big 200.
We'll meet up with Harvey Wallbanger, Tommy Collins, and a couple pieces of iconic pop culture that have impacted us both. So pull up a stool and join in.
All right, Elliot, welcome back today to 1976, a banner year on so many different fronts. I know we're a decade apart, so you are celebrating the big 03 in that year. I was going into teenagerhood. I was 13. So today I'm going to talk about a piece of art that was influential to me, as is the music that goes along with it. How about yourself?
I think the fact, the way you labeled my birthday, I wouldn't say it was '03. I think my parents, if I were to go back in a photo album and look, it would just be a 3 sitting on top of the cake. But being the Dukes of Hazzard fan that you are, I can understand why '03 it was probably sitting on top of your cake when you were that age. Yeah, so for me, obviously, very young. But that doesn't mean we don't remember things from that time. And one of, if not my earliest design memory, if you will, was from the year 1976. And I'm eager to talk about that with you.
All right, kick it off.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Okay,
okay.
so why don't you start? Tell us about this influential piece of design work that really hit you when you were 3 years old.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, and in we joke about these things, but I think with both of us, there was that trigger that really got us interested in or aware of design. There's sort of this thing or this series of things we could point to. Maybe it's of something we were watching on television, or maybe it was something that we got in the mail, let's say, like, I don't know, picture pages or something like this, or Sesame Street, right? All these different things from when we were little. For me, though, it really wasn't something that was related to children. It was something that was made for everybody. So for Todd, for I think both you and I and anyone listening who loves art or loves design, there certainly is this thing or collection of things, whatever form it may take, that really kind of, I don't know, piqued our interest or got us aware of, wow, like there's this profession or this movement or whatever you want to refer to it as if you're a little kid, called design. And it's like you just look at something, you're like, I want to make something like that, or why do I like that? This period of reflection in whatever primitive form it may take. I guess we could refer to it as like stopping power. Like I wasn't paying attention to stuff and all of a sudden there's this thing that I'm looking at, or I want it. Little kids want things. And it's like, why do I want that? So for me, year 1976, of course, was a big year for the country. It was our 200th birthday. And for a lot of folks who might be too young or might not remember their design history, there was an amazing logo that was developed by the firm Shermayev and Geismar in New York City, still around today, for the Bicentennial. It's kind of hard, especially unfortunately in our current political climate and social climate in this country, to just remember how excited everyone was for the 200th anniversary for our Bicentennial here in the United States. Everything was painted red, white, and blue. Every town, every main street you went to, there was bunting, parades, the fire hydrants were painted red, white, and blue. All of these different things. Flags on the front of everyone's houses. When I was a little kid, I loved flags. In fact, that probably was due to the fact that my mom had hung an original, not original, but a 13-star Betsy Ross flag over my bed. It wasn't made by Betsy Ross. Well, as far as I know, although I guess I should have hung on to that. And
You really should have kept that.
I should have had it appraised. So, related to the bunting and everything like this, this designer, Bruce Blackburn, really created this, in my opinion, today as well as when I was 3, this perfect, I think, logo that just exemplified the spirit of the time. Just to describe it really quickly, it's a star. It's a white star. It's like knocked out of a background. And then the 5 points of the star are wrapped by these red, white, and blue sort of parallel swooshes. If you sort of think about a Nike swoosh, kind of that comet tail kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But they're these parallel red, white, and blue stripes. And Bruce Blackburn referred to them as bunting, quote unquote. That was sort of his thing. And it was really, just a timeless logo. It was the right amount of... it was streamlined, so it was certainly modern, but it wasn't cold because it still sort of referenced, again, Main Street and all these sorts of things. His original mark, we'll put this on our website. Folks, of course, can look it up on their own if they're not already familiar with it. The original mark was just the star, and then the Bicentennial Commission wanted this Helvetica type sort of ringing it, this black Helvetica type, so that people would know, I guess, when it was outside of its initial context, what it was or what it represented. But I don't even think it needed that. Like, being a little kid and looking at it, I don't really remember the type per se and the fact that it was a Bicentennial. I think it was so of its time, and it was so in an environment that there's no way that you could have mistaken it for anything else. Even if it was, say, a flag flying in front of the post office, it was always flying under the American flag. Mm-hmm. And so if you're like a little kid, it was so obvious and so simple to make that connection. It's one star on this flag. There's 50 stars on the flag above it. This logo has stripes. The flag above it has stripes. I think for a little kid, it was such an obvious connection. And it was, again, on stamps, patches, all of these different things. It was just, I still love it. I love it to this day. A lot of designers who are around my age, when I have brought this logo up for them in conversation, their eyes sort of light up, and they have said to me that they had a very similar response, and it's one of the first things they remember as well. So I'm really curious, of course, you were a little bit older. Did that have an impact on you? Did you remember it, and what was your response to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like you were there. Even at a 3-year-old level, I think you really kind of nailed the atmosphere that was going on for the Bicentennial. I was 13, so I wasn't around a lot before, but I was understanding that this was kind of a big deal for our country, and it was a thing that brought people together. The Bicentennial, obviously, the event brought people together. The celebrations started a year in advance, and certainly this mark was a visual reminder of that and a merchandising reminder of that. And I certainly remember very well. And the thing that I remember about it is, I was starting to get into design. I was starting to kind of develop a knack for things like that. So the first thing I thought was, okay, well, it could have just been a star, but the designer, and I didn't know who the designer was at the time, took it to another place. So it was the negative space formed by that ring of bunting that made the star that worked on everything. And it was simple, and it was beautiful, and it complemented, as you said before, all the other stuff around it with 50 stars and the other red and white stripes of other flags. So yeah, it was everywhere. And when I think about it now, with the experience you and I have in this industry, it really was brilliant. It was tapping into national pride. It was tapping into the history of our country coming together. And it gave some stuff for people to buy, to celebrate this, which I thought was pretty interesting back then.
One of the most common things when I was doing a little bit of research about this, of course, was postage stamps. So if you think about the post office and postage stamps, I had mentioned a post office earlier in terms of like one place where you might see the flag flying on a flagpole or something like that. Postal stamps are ubiquitous, right? They're everywhere. And even if you don't buy them, but I send you a letter with one attached to it, you're naturally going to see it. I think even today, it's interesting. There are a few postage stamp designs that I've seen there that are currently being used. And there's no way to me that they are not in some way, shape, or form influenced by this original design. You had mentioned, I think a minute ago, they used the phrase going places. And I think I can't let this conversation go without mentioning Bruce Blackburn also designed the famous NASA worm logo. And not only that, the Bicentennial logo for years and years and years was painted on the Kennedy Center rocket buildings, or whatever you want to call them, where like the space shuttle was kept, and prior to that, of course, rockets were kept, and this sort of thing. So it was truly civic pride on any number of levels. It was so iconic.
So you're telling me that you can name the number of graphic designers whose logos have been shot into space on like one hand?
Yeah, oh, definitely on one hand.
Like one finger.
Yeah. No.
On the outside of rockets.
Yeah, well, I think a contemporary designer, I think it's actually at least up to 2 now. I was reading the other week that there's a new logo that's been attached to rockets for a specific program, space program. But yeah, I mean, never. And then whoever designed the NASA meatball logo, which I don't have in the files of my mind. So whoever that designer was that I can't remember, maybe we'll post that on our webpage as well. What a privilege. I mean, this guy, the fact that he was able to design these 2 incredible logos that are truly iconic in any sense of the word. You know, to me, iconic is like the average, like you and I looking at stuff, it's sort of like, yeah, okay, whatever. Does your mom know what it is, right? Would your neighbor know what it is? And even if, like I was saying earlier, you removed that circle of type and you showed this, to your point, it was just a negative star inside of these stripes. But I think if you showed it to anyone of a certain age, they would say, oh yeah, that's the Bicentennial logo.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, so Todd, I don't know about you. I'm feeling patriotic.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little bit groovy.
I'm groovy.
Kind of want to rock out.
Always.
And maybe that means we ought to take a break, get some refills on our drinks, and meet back here around the table in just a minute.
Great idea. Cutaway music! Yeah, interesting. So, this would be a good time for me to introduce something from 1976 too, because I can see a lot of similarities. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do this.
All right. So, I think you went pretty highbrow with the Bicentennial logo, which is great and it's beautiful. I went a little more lowbrow.
Are you trying to frighten me?
No. I can't do that with my clothes on.
Especially if this is just an audio thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. I'm just making,
I can describe it.
Yeah, anyone out there listening, you have just dodged a tremendous bullet.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that compliment.
What was not?
bullet.
Yeah.
Okay, back to what I was going to say.
Okay.
All right. So, as you were talking, and there's some interesting similarities because I picked a piece also from 1976. It had not been shot into space as far as I know yet. But when I think about this, had a major impact on me. It was a representation of a cultural movement at the time too. This is, for me, it was the album cover for Kiss's Rock and Roll Over, which was their 5th studio album.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Let's connect some dots here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the first dot I would connect. First of all, you reminded me about the Bicentennial logo having kind of this circular motion, these sort of bunting things that are going around the outside of the star. The Rock and Roll Over emblem, let's just say it's an emblem. It was designed by Michael Durrett, and I'll get into that in just a second. But
Okay.
for all intents and purposes, it's basically a patch, a giant patch that looks like a flaming wheel.
If I recall, I've actually seen it sold as a patch.
Yeah. And, I know it's hard to believe a band like Kiss would actually sell some stuff like that.
Crass commercialism.
I know, it's hard to believe. Anyway, so the whole circular motif ties those two things together. What I also found interesting, in addition to the circular thing, obviously the Bicentennial logo was communicating a complex message in a really simple form, right? The star, which obviously is on our flag, but it was also used for military purposes, and we didn't want to, like I had anything to do with that design.
Yeah.
But they were hiring 13-year-olds back then. Yeah.
Bruce Blackburn was sitting in his studio late one night, looking up at the ceiling, thinking to himself, what would Todd Coates do?
What would a 13-year-old do? What I'm sure that they were thinking probably was, let's not make it too military. This is a bigger context
Sure.
than just that. The Kiss album cover. So Kiss, at the time, we didn't know this, and I said a few minutes ago in the intro to this, Kiss was a cultural phenomenon. I mean, now we sort of look back and it's like, yeah, okay, they've been doing this for 45, 50 years. In 1976, nobody bigger on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody bigger. They were coming off of probably their two most popular records that put them out on the world stage. This was the next one. It's not my favorite Kiss record by any stretch, but it certainly had the appearance of being this kind of monolithic thing, like a star would. This, though, was like a flaming wheel. So, they were known for their stage shows, fire and explosions and bombs and things like that. And so this sort of fit that, but it also had that Coney Island vibe to it that went along with this sort of traveling circus of knights in Satan's service, as the rumor was. So the thing, though, that I was trying to get across here is the band was really falling apart internally, which they would hang on for a few more records, but at the time they were really falling apart. A lot of conflict inside the band. So the beauty of this particular design was there were no people on top. Like, there were four members. The band was completely designed from the beginning to be four personalities that everyone knew their name. And here was the case where you've got all four that could be showcased at any time because the album worked as a circle.
Whose idea was that?
It was Michael Durrett's, because the band gave him zero direction when it came to doing this.
So they were a client.
They said, I think it went something like this. Okay, I'm going to do my impersonation here. Oh, so Michael, we want you to do something that we can sell, like pat yourself, okay?
Is that Hoss from Bonanza as Kiss's agent and the liaison with Michael Durrett?
Then I would have gone, "Did burn it, Paul?"
Oh.
Yeah. So no, they gave him little direction. Again, the album before this was huge. Any other Kiss fans out there? It's called Destroyer, and it really was a departure for them musically. Quite successful. So this one was a major follow-up. It didn't hit the same levels of sales, but it certainly sold out quickly. Now, here's the kind of cool thing, though. Michael Durrett is he grew up in the Coney Island area, near Coney Island. So he was certainly influenced by those banners and signage and flaming wheels of death and amusement park stuff. So you can see that when you start to dig into the context, it's like, oh yeah, it's really coming through here.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, we have a picture of this on our webpage for those of you who aren't familiar with it. But yeah, like the Kiss logo has like lightning tails coming out of it. The circle that you mentioned is kind of like a saw blade,
Wasn't that
right?
wasn't that your dancer name back in college, Lightning Tails?
Lightning tails.
Yeah.
Well, that was our dance troupe. That was like all of us together. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pre-river dance, but we held our own.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Yeah. Cool hand lettering. To your point, like multiple colors, like these pops of primary color against like black and black background and things like this. Yeah, it's probably the best. Certainly in terms of original album art, it was made for a T-shirt, right? Made for a patch, that kind of thing. And yeah, your eye, to return to something you said a minute ago, your eye just travels around it. Like there are all these visual cues that, for those of you listening to this on your phone and looking at this 1 inch by 1 inch postage stamp and wondering what an album cover is, it was like this 12-inch square, whatever, poster, right?
Yeah.
And you'd get it, and of course you'd put the album on and you would listen to it. And yeah, I can only imagine like turning this thing in your hands as you're like, listening to this album for the first time. Super cool.
Yeah.
Did they ever use this graphic like in concert? Was it ever like part of their stage craft or anything like that?
Yeah, it sort of was, not exactly, which is interesting because I was going to ask you a question that I'm getting ready to answer that you would probably ask me first, which is, why was this so influential to you, Todd? And that's because this particular album came out November 11th, 1976.
Mm-hmm.
So near the end, this was their second album in a year, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It just so happened my very first concert was November 27th of 1976. So this was a big deal for me. It will always be sort of connected to that idea of being a teenager, going to a loud concert at the Dorton Arena in Raleigh.
Oh, yeah, which is still there today.
National Registry of Historical Places.
Yep.
Only held like 7,000 people or something like that.
Folks out there need to look it up, though. It's a super cool building.
It's beautiful.
And we could go off on a tangent about this, but the first time I drove to Raleigh, when you and I lived in the same city for a little while, that was one of the first things I saw. It kind of looks like a Pringle chip with sides on it, right? And I remember it with glass sides, and I remember looking at it and thinking, what is that? Like, that just was super cool to me, but that's another story for another day.
So tell me about the influence that the Bicentennial logo has had on you.
I think the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things, is design as a unifier. Design is kind of this umbrella. Because to me, what you talked about, like why this mattered to you, it mattered to you because you can point to a specific night, literally, like a specific day in your life, which I think is super cool. It's kind of like I'm planting the flag of design, and it was a multi-sensory experience, right? It was a rock concert. I mean, that's so cool. And so for me, I think, going back to what I was mentioning earlier about celebrating the bicentennial, if you think about it, that was also a multi-sensory experience, right? There were parades, there were TV shows about this, like stuff I'm sure, I mean, I wasn't in school then, I was too young, but my parents certainly had stuff lying around the house, like I said, whether it was stamps or pamphlets or things like this. In fact, you can, and we'll have a link to this. We don't make any money from this because we're not smart enough to do that. but I'll have a link to, like, if folks want to buy a copy of the standards manual, we'll put that up there because the standards manual is being reprinted. And one of the things in the standards manual is it shows the storyboards from the animation of the logo for TV, which I thought was really, really neat. Just thinking out loud about some of the stuff. But I think the reason it matters is we were just bathing in it. And I don't mean that in a jingoistic way or an overtly political way. Like, no one was taking sides on this. It was just a really big party. And I think it was like giving thanks to just the good fortune of, hey, this experiment seems to have been working by and large for 200 years. It was right after the Vietnam War had ended. There was certainly, it's not like 1976 was without its issues.
Right, right. So,
Um,
okay, question for you then.
yeah,
So,
sure.
because I was going to say that too. There were bits of conflict in 1976 and before, which I'm sure that's the time when they were planning for all of these events and this design work. So, how did it start? Whose idea? Who gave it the green light to kind of pull the country together?
Do you really want to know the answer to this?
It's gonna this is gonna lower this is you're gonna tell me there's no Santa Claus now, right?
Close.
Okay.
Almost like Kiss might not have been like a real band, but I'll leave that for you to reveal to the audience. I don't want to, just like, I'm not going to say anything about pro wrestling because I really don't want to upset anybody.
That's right.
But yeah, it was Nixon.
What?
Yeah.
What?
He was the one who was heading the commission at the time to figure out what the bicentennial celebration needed to be. And so he was the one who helped, believe it or not, pull together this brief. There was like a competition held, like how all good design ultimately comes to the surface. There is a competition. I don't even know, if there was a. I mean, sure, obviously, notoriety was the prize. I'm not sure if there was any sort of monetary prize to go along with it. But yeah, a bunch of firms submitted stuff. Bruce Blackburn worked late, burned the midnight oil a few nights, and on behalf of Shemima Geismar submitted this thing. And at the end of the day, Tricky Dick and company liked it enough that moved forward and went into production.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, so you never know. Yeah, obviously I'm too young to sort of remember the Destroyer days and all these sorts of things. I mean, I'm aware of it, of course, but I didn't live it, quote unquote. My parents were not jamming out to Kiss on the hi-fi when I was 2 years old in the playpen or whatever. So why don't you tell me a little bit more, like why Kiss? There are plenty of bands hanging around in the mid-'70s. Why Kiss? What was it about Kiss?
Well, so the band, as I said a little bit ago, the band consciously made a decision. They wanted to be unlike any other band that they've ever seen. They wanted to be the band they had not seen on stage. They wanted to bring a higher level of performance, a higher level of awe to their stagecraft. So first 3 studio records pretty much sounded like a live concert. There's some gems on there, obviously, but it never broke until the suggestion was to record their live show because the record company was completely out of money, and this was a Hail Mary to be like, well,
I wasn't
you've
aware of
gotta,
that.
yeah. So the record that actually broke them was a live record, and it's called Alive, obviously. Kiss fans know that. And it broke them wide open immediately. And then they followed it up with the next studio album, the 4th studio album, which is Destroyer, which has great artwork also by a guy named Ken Kelly. And you talked about these 12 by 12 posters before that were LPs, and certainly vinyl has made a comeback now. But at the time, so this band was mysterious. They were characters. And there was a lot of story around them. Parents were afraid of them. Grown-ups were thinking they were dangerous for their kids. Obviously, that made it more attractive to kids. But what we would do as we were listening to these records is we would decipher what these 12 by 12 inch messages were. These artwork pieces. We would try to understand, what are they telling us? There's secrets in here.
Sure.
There's secrets in this artwork, in addition to the secrets in the music. So it was creating a mythology, and it was creating a mystique. This particular album cover by Michael Durrett is different than all the others. Although he went on to do another one for them years later named Sonic Boom, it doesn't really look like this. But the other records that they were creating had a little bit more of a fantasy feel to it, or they were not as graphic as this. So this stood out in the catalog of those records.
So how did they find Michael Durrett, or did he approach them, or how did that come about?
Yeah, the band is from New York City, and they found him as a referral, I believe. I might have to check on this, but as a referral from some of the other record company folks that they were dealing with. Michael Durrett he was popular, and he's still doing it too. But he had done some really great magazine artwork for a Japanese magazine, arts magazine called Idea.
Mm-hmm.
The band's third studio record also has kind of a Japanese style to it. So they were kind of in tune with woodcut prints, Japanese prints, things like that, that sort of aesthetic, Asian aesthetic. So I think they were connected in that particular way. They saw this Idea magazine, and that magazine cover in itself, which this album cover was based on, was inspired by, again, shooting gallery, Coney Island, stuff like that. So high graphic, bold pattern content.
I'm still it's just interesting to me that Kiss was sitting around one day and they looked at the coffee table and there happened to be this Japanese design magazine sitting there. It's like, where were they? They weren't at the dentist's office, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Who did this? Who did this highlights cover?
What?
Todd, you really should think about going to the dentist.
I was thinking, oh shit, I don't know the answer to that.
I give up. Who?
I don't know, Elliot.
Which highlights issue is it? Hold it closer to the microphone so I can get a good look at it.
All right, tell me 3 things that you took away from the Bicentennial mark that stayed with you and possibly still influences you today.
Yeah, I think design, like a design icon, as a cultural touchstone.
Yeah.
There's a thread kind of running through this podcast for both of us. I think it's that. I think the second thing is taking a very simple form and being able to do more with it. If you think about it, it's not a complex thing. I think someone could look at it for a good few minutes and they could remember what it looks like enough to somewhat faithfully, I think, at least, if you were to give someone, say, a piece of paper and a red colored pencil and a blue colored pencil, I think they could get reasonably close with it, even if they're not a designer. I would say in terms of the third thing, I think it's, even though it wasn't intended to be nostalgic, it definitely is nostalgic. And I think that comes down to kind of like what you said about your evening watching Kiss. Mm-hmm. It's all what you sort of return to.
Interesting. All right. So for me, 3 takeaways from Kiss's Rock and Roll Over, designed by Michael Durrett, that has stayed with me and probably influenced me that time to more seriously consider design as a career. First of all, for me, it was opening your eyes to influence and things that were not meant to be highbrow to begin with. Banners, signage, like I said, Coney Island, bubblegum wrappers, Wheels of Death, things like that.
And I think design history and culture has caught up to that in a big way.
Yeah, I totally agree. But using that type of untrained communication art as a departure point has been something that's carried with me.
I think in the mid 70s, high design culture was certainly not about that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Secondly, for me is I love all of his work, and in this one in particular that we're talking about, it was he was able to put a voice to letter forms and give them story with simple marks, basically. Things that we can really simplify, boil down into basic shapes. So it put voice and it put meaning to letter forms. You could actually draw pictures of letters, and you could make drawings of letters and things, and it would actually tell you part of a story there. The last thing for me, the third thing for me that I've taken away from the Rock and Roll Over album cover is the blend of those things together, of design and illustration. So where does one stop and the other begin? Like, just using, and this is sort of part of the second thing I just said, just using letter forms is great. Making them illustrative to help tell a story is great. But when you mix all of that together, that to me is really cool. And before you know it, you're looking at something iconic and beautiful and worthy of a patch to be sold at a concert.
You and I have known each other for a long time, and I would say, I would classify you, if I could be so bold, as a design illustrator. You know, I think you both are very obviously going into your work. And yeah, I think a lot of designers I like I'm a fan of Michael Durrett's work as well. Neville Brody is someone else who I always think of in terms of, like, especially 30 or 40 years ago, it was like, oh, this typeface I want doesn't exist. There's no typeface that fits the mood I want, so I'll just make it. You know? And yeah, I think that's a lot of the typefaces for younger designers today that we take for granted. Like Michael Durrett, you can buy several of his typefaces. They are freely available. One of my favorites that I love of his is MetroScript. As we start to wrap up, are there any other I would say words of wisdom, but anyone listening this long, their expectations should be lowered.
Yeah, I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Yeah, we're still. But in the next hour, if you guys stick with us, we'll find something.
I think 1976 was an interesting time in our history and world history. So much going on. If you compare it to 2020, which is when we're recording this, it would be hard to imagine that we could do the same things again. You know, you talked about the unification of the Bicentennial. We didn't have the level of information floating around like we have now, so we didn't have the level of influence from people on the internet, obviously everywhere. It was, you had 3 TV channels, and this particular mark, the Bicentennial mark, was everywhere on the 3 channels, and certainly the cultural phenomenon that was KISS was everywhere on 3 channels as well. So there was a collective agreement, if you will,
or conversation.
Yeah. It like or hate anything, we all got the same story.
Well, Todd, this was great. We always seem to have fun together, and I always love our design conversations. So thanks for taking the time, and I look forward to doing it again super soon.
Yeah, we got some great stuff planned for future episodes, so come back, check back often. Hi, while we have your attention, if you want to learn more about us and the podcast, there are a few ways to do it.
Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com. All of that is spelled out. No numbers.
Kind of a long URL, so do yourself a favor and bookmark it. Once you're there, you can find links to more information about the subjects in this episode, our episode archive, and information about both of us.
Wait, we do want people to visit, right?
Well, and look for us on social media. You can find those links on our website as well.
And while we're at it, if you have a friend who you feel will dig on our rambling,
tell him or her what we're up to.
While we can't guarantee that they will remain your friend, we can guarantee that they will listen to at least 30 seconds of whatever episode you send them the link to.
That's being a little shameless.
And speaking of being shameless, it wouldn't be a proper ask if we didn't mention that if you like what you hear, you can also make a donation via our website. We have a Nigerian prince handling all transactions for us.
In fact, he told us to mention that we have stickers to mail to anyone who donates $10 or more. Are we done?
We're done.
We're done.